What is the least restrictive environment for a qualifying child? According to IDEA, all states must have in place procedures which assure that, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are not disabled, and that special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular educational environment occurs only when the nature or severity of the disability is such that education in regular classes with the use of supplementary aids cannot be achieved satisfactorily. In other words, IDEA requires school districts to place students in the least restrictive environment, meaning that, to the maximum extent appropriate, students are to be educated in the regular classroom with appropriate aids and supports, along with their non-disabled peers, unless the student's IEP requires some other arrangement. Therefore, to carry out IDEA's least restrictive environment provisions, the regular education classroom is the first placement option for each student with a disability before a more restrictive placement is considered. The application of least restrictive environment begins in the IEP meeting with discussions of current levels of performance, long-term goals and objectives, and the required services needed to meet those goals and objectives. Placement decisions are based upon the presumption that services will be provided in the general education classroom. Only when there is clear documentation that the goals and objectives of the IEP cannot be met, even with the appropriate aids and supports, can the IEP team consider placing the student outside the regular classroom. IDEA does not require that every student with a disability be placed in the regular classroom. This is reflected in the requirement that school districts make available a range of placement options, known as the continuum of alternative placements. This list of options includes instruction in regular classes, special schools, instruction in hospitals and institutions, and instruction in the home. Each is considered to be more restrictive than the one before it, with education in the regular classroom being the least restrictive of all. What must be considered when determining which placement is appropriate for a student with a disability? The most important factor to consider is that each student's placement is based on the individual abilities and needs of the student. The instructional needs and necessary related services, which are documented in the IEP, are the basis of the placement decision. Also considered are the benefits of education in a regular classroom as compared to the benefits of a special education classroom, the non-academic benefits from interactions with non-disabled students, and the degree of disruption of the education of other students, resulting in the inability to meet the needs of the student with the disability. To what extent is it permissible under IDEA for school districts to consider the impact of a regular classroom placement on those students who do not have a disability? IDEA regulation states that in determining the least restrictive environment, consideration is given to any potential harmful effect on the student or on the quality of services that the student needs. If a student with a disability has behavioral problems that are so disruptive in a regular classroom that the education of other students is significantly impaired, the needs of the student cannot be met in that environment. Before such a determination can be made, however, the school district must make sure that the student has received all supplementary aids and services to accommodate his individual needs in the regular classroom. If the placement team determines that, even with supplementary aids and services, the IEP cannot be satisfactorily met in the regular educational environment, then that placement would not be the least restrictive environment because the student's needs would not be met in that setting. To what extent are parents involved in the placement decisions of their child? All decisions regarding placement are made after the IEP is developed, and parents are a part of any team that develops the IEP and decides on placement. IDEA Section 1414E requires that the school ensure that the parents of each child with a disability are members of any group that makes decisions on the educational placement of their child. Parents also have the right to disagree with any decision made by the school district in regards to the educational placement of their child. The federal regulations for IDEA 2004 include a section, subpart E, called Procedural Safeguards. These safeguards are designed to protect the rights of parents and their children with disabilities and provide ways for parents and school districts to resolve disputes. While it may be expected that parents and school districts will work together to resolve disputes, there are times when the two parties cannot reach an agreement. In some instances, this can lead to civil action. An example of this is in the case of LB versus Nebo School District, 10th Circuit, 2004, in which the Nebo School District placed the plaintiff's child, KB, in the Parkview Special Education Preschool. Nebo considered the plaintiff's request for a mainstream placement, but offered Parkview as the only placement it thought appropriate, along with 8 to 15 hours per week of ABA services. The plaintiff argued that the IEP goals could not be met with anything less than 40 hours of ABA and declined the Parkview placement, deciding to keep KB in a mainstream private school. The plaintiff requested due process to seek reimbursement for the ABA program and filed a complaint in district court. It was argued that a violation of IDEA's procedural mandates had occurred, and the school district had failed to provide KB with a FAPE and failed to provide a least restrictive environment by only offering the Parkview placement with the ABA supplemental program. The court concluded that Parkview was not KB's least restrictive environment, establishing a violation of the IDEA's least restrictive environment provision. The plaintiff was entitled to reimbursement for the reasonable cost of ABA and aid services in support of her private mainstream education. So, what is the least restrictive environment for a qualifying child? The continuum of alternative placements has numerous options. Whichever option is deemed most appropriate must be the setting that offers the child the maximum opportunities for social growth and academic success. It is this type of learning environment, one that is productive, stimulating, and engaging, that will be the most beneficial choice for the least restrictive environment.